Yeah, I will. Oh, thank you. Oh, Diane.
I'll do it.
All right, we're going to get going. Good evening, everyone. How are you? Good. I'm Kathy Pape. I'm the Executive Director of the Republican Party of Waukesha County, and thank you so much for coming. All right, so tonight, I'd like to begin by, first of all, thanking Terry Dietrich, if he would be quiet. I'm kidding. I suddenly feel like a teacher. Terry! Terry is our chairman of the Republican Party of Waukesha County. And he began WISRED. How many of you have heard of WISRED? Yes. Okay, so we started WISRED 3 years ago, or Terry really did. We just do what he tells us to do. And it has been incredibly successful. We have an 87% success rate of putting conservatives into office. So we, in the 3 years, have turned over all but 2 school boards in the county, which is amazingly awesome. And all we have is 2 more, and if everybody gets out and votes in April, they'll be turned over too. So we have our candidates. All we need for you to do is get out there and vote. Vote, everybody. 2 years ago, we launched a second initiative, which is our Election Integrity Initiative, and this is headed by Annette Kuklich. There's Annette. So in these 2 years, we have trained over 300 poll workers, and we will be training more this summer. This is our year to turn in our lists to all the clerks. This happens every 2 years. So if you'd like to get involved, stay tuned for the emails that'll come out for trainings this summer. Then, tonight is our 3rd initiative at the Republican Party of Waukesha County. This is really Diane Schlosser's brainchild. And it came about working here. We really realized that people didn't really understand how things worked. We didn't understand how things work. We actually still don't know how all things work, believe it or not. So really Diane, I just helped. She would brainstorm and I go, and that kind of thing. Created Citizens Information Forum. And the mission is to help the citizens of Waukesha County be more effective in civic engagement. So if we know how our local governments work, we'll be able to actually work it and have more control and more say in what is going on. So this is why we are launching Citizens Information Forum tonight. We are going to have another session in February, and Paul Farrow and Paul Decker. Anybody know Paul Decker is the president of the Waukesha board, county board, and Paul Farrow, who's our executive director for the county, will be here to discuss their roles, their responsibilities, how they work together. So that really should be exciting. So that's the 16th of February. So if you plan on coming back, put some questions together and bring them with you on the 16th. Another thing that I would like to bring up is that this is a membership drive time. We have caucus on the 25th of February. We'd love to have you come to caucus. You need to join. You can join, there's forms on the table if you want to write a check or pay by cash, or you can go online to our website, which is waukeshagop.org. We have different categories of joining. An individual is $25 a year, people. But this is how you support us. These initiatives, take resources And the only way that we bring in revenue are two ways: donations or memberships. And that's it. That's how we survive and keep these doors open. So we'd really appreciate you joining. Let's see. That's it. I'd like to introduce Diane. Okay, so here's a little bit on Diane. Diane and I literally lived together for 4 years. We met here, right here, in this little space 4 years ago. And we have been tethered to each other ever since. And it's been actually such a blessing. I don't know what I would do without her. I don't have a sister. I have 2 brothers. She's my sister. And it's been just an amazing experience. But before she met me, she actually was a media buyer. She married John Slosser right there. They've been married for 42 years. They have, are you ready for this? 8 children. 8. They're all grown. So you have 8 grandchildren on top of it. Diane has done a lot of other things. She edited her father's book on Hiroshima, and it's on sale on Amazon. So she's done a lot of things. But our time together here has been just incredibly special. And this is just such a special night for her. I'm so excited. So Diane's going to be talking on citizenship, why it matters, and how to restore it.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you, Kathy. And the feeling is mutual. We work very well together. We're a good team. So, citizenship, why it matters. So I'll talk first about a few definitions that I want to cover, and then I want to highlight a little bit of history of citizenship, why it's important, why it's in jeopardy, and how we can be more effective citizens. So first, a clarification. What this talk is not about. This is not about partisan politics. You won't hear Republican or Democrat yet. It is about something more foundational, and that being politics in the classical sense, having to do with the polis, the city, and the city regarding citizenship. A second clarification. Words are at the center of the culture war. And for any communication to be effective, there has to be a definition of terms, because words represent ideas and ideas have consequences, right? So I'd like to provide a more authentic definition of 2 words, freedom and happiness, more than what our culture currently offers. As we all know, Thomas Jefferson wrote extensively about freedom and happiness, but what do these words mean? Our contemporary culture has multiplied pleasure exponentially, and yet people are still unhappy and joyless. How did Jefferson understand happiness? Well, he had a classical education, which included studying Aristotle and other Greek philosophers. Aristotle's definition of happiness is essentially doing virtuous things with other virtuous people. Doesn't that make sense? Aren't we happier people when we do good things? And that takes us to the term freedom. Freedom is not a life without obstacles or impediments to pleasure. Freedom is not satiating all of our desires unencumbered. Freedom is not free from anything, but rather freedom is for something. As Lord Acton wrote, freedom is the right to be able to do what we ought. And what we ought to be free to do is pursue happiness, which is to lead a good life, a life of virtue. This is the pursuit of happiness that Thomas Jefferson understood, to be agents of our own life project. So please keep this in mind when we're discussing citizenship. So we'll begin. So about 10 years ago, I was watching television, And there was a woman who was a victim of the IRS illegally blocking the filing of her 501c3 organization because of ideological opposition. She testified to a congressional committee and halted her testimony with a heated exclamation. "I am a citizen," she told Congress, "not a subject." Well, it'd been a long time since I'd heard citizen and subject in the same sentence, and it caught my attention. So I began paying more attention to this idea of citizenship. We use the word resident, non-resident, alien, undocumented worker, migrant, but not citizen. Why? In his book, The Dying Citizen, Victor Davis Hanson, the Stanford University historian, he reminds us that the idea of citizenship is still rather new in terms of world history. Being a citizen basically means legally having all the rights and responsibilities and belonging to a country, and that comes with the citizenship. But it's not something everyone has had or still has in the 21st century. Most people throughout the world were slaves or serfs, peasants, but citizens had special rights, and they had unique responsibilities. Paul of Tarsus, in the 1st century Rome, if you recall, was a citizen of Rome, which is why when he was charged with a crime he didn't commit, he had the right and the privilege as a citizen to appeal to Caesar to hear his case. Now, before going any further, I'd like to quickly review what many scholars refer to as the 4 pillars of Western civilization, and this includes citizenship. In so doing, I hope to provide a backdrop for the connection between citizenship, property ownership, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness. So these 4 pillars can be remembered by simply remembering 4 cities. So pillar 1 is Jerusalem. Jerusalem represents biblical truths that include the golden rule to treat others as you treat yourself. Also the idea of individual human dignity and individual human rights that come from being made in the image of God, an idea affirmed in both Judaism and Christianity. As Senator Josh Hawley wrote in The Federalist last September, in a world of clans, tribes, and slaves, the Bible introduced the very idea of the individual. The 10 Commandments are given to the Israelites, yes, but they are directed to individual behavior and individual dignity. So pillar 1, Jerusalem, biblical truths and individual human dignity. Pillar 2 is represented by Athens. The ancient Greeks developed the study of logos, which isn't just meaning word, but it means reason and logic and discourse, the exchange of ideas in the pursuit of truth and virtue. Athens also gave rise to democracy, when we know literally democracy means of the people. As part of this democracy, Greek citizens took an active role in their government of their city-state. And there were over 1,500 city-states. I mean, we often think of Sparta and Athens, and that's about it. But there were 1,500 city-states. All citizens could vote, but only property owners could be citizens. In addition to voting, a citizen was required to pay taxes and serve in the military. So pillar 2, Athens, discourse and democracy. Pillar 3 is Rome. Now, Rome adapted Greek ideas and added the rule of law, which was written down for the first time, known to all, and applied to all citizens. The rule of law is essential for justice and to avoid punishment being meted out by a king, the whim of a Caesar, the whim of a president, or the whim of a dictator. Roman law provided the framework for American civil law. So pillar 3, Rome, the rule of law. And then there's pillar 4, London, the Magna Carta of 1215, the Great Charter. It was a document that a reluctant King John signed, agreeing to the barons' claim of personal and property rights. And among these were protection of church rights, protection of property, protection from illegal imprisonment, access to swift justice, limits on feudal payments, taxes. Pillar 4, London, human and property rights. So if these ideas sound familiar, they should, right? Because what we refer to as Western civilization developed from these 4 pillars: biblical truths and human dignity, democracy and discourse, rule of law, and protection of human rights. Now also referred to as our Greco-Roman Judeo-Christian heritage. Most of America's founding fathers had a classical education which consisted in studying these 4 pillars. So you can see how these foundational pillars guided our founding fathers in the writing of the Declaration and the Constitution. In these ancient civilizations, citizenship was and remains the unique mechanism to determine who can vote, who can own property, who can serve in the military, and who pays taxes, and who is protected by the law. In his Western Conservative Summit on Citizenship a few years ago, Victor Davis Hanson asserts that the importance of citizenship here cannot be underestimated, especially in America. And one of his reasons is because citizenship gave rise to the middle class. I found this really fascinating. Why is that? Well, the rich were powerful and influential. They were free to live their lives and be rich. But if you were really poor, you depended on the benevolence of the rich, or you became a ward of the state, and you relied on government handouts. There was no scaffolding for any societal upward mobility. Just stuck. So the truly revolutionary idea of citizenship produced an empowered, self-reliant, independent middle class. And as citizens, people now had legal status, which carried with it, among other things, the right to pass on their property to their heirs, which means they could begin to build wealth, hence that upward mobility. So what was good for the middle class was good for everyone. Now, the importance of property here cannot be underestimated. Each of the 4 pillars, Jerusalem, Athens, Rome, and London, emphasize property as a fundamental right. Now, if you go back to the 10 Commandments, it states, "Thou shalt not steal." So doesn't that assume somebody owns something? This implies a right to property. And Athens and Rome had civil laws about stealing, and property ownership was a criterion for citizenship. And of course, the barons resisted King John confiscating their property. So I'll put this more bluntly, nobody can steal your stuff, okay? It was wrong in ancient times, as it's still wrong now, whether it be by a person or a government bureaucracy. The current media chatter about the Great Reset, that you'll own nothing and be happy, is a flat-out lie, and it flies in the face of 5,000 years of human history and human nature, right? We all want to own something and take ownership of it. Now, a brief side note. In the original Declaration of Independence, Jefferson wanted to use the word life, liberty, and property. But later, that was considered too narrow. So he used the broader phrase, pursuit of happiness, because that includes property, right? And that happiness comes from living a virtuous life. So property is foundational to citizenship, which was essential to building a middle class. So let's continue. City-states had borders, and so obviously you were a citizen of one or the other. And as mentioned earlier, citizenship carried with it a military obligation, and this was to protect those borders. So there was an element of loyalty and community, further safeguarding your property from being seized or vandalized by another person or country or another city-state. Borders provide security and stability. With this security and stability, the ability to create wealth allowed citizens to carve out an autonomous livelihood. And this idea of citizenship spread throughout Europe and eventually into the United States. Today there are about 190 countries in the world, and less than half of them have a constitution and thus true citizenship. Our Constitution is 233 years old. Now, just a side note about the middle class. A recent Pew Research study showed in 1971, the middle class accounted for 61% of the United States population. Today, it is barely 50. So in less than one generation, the American middle class has shrunk significantly. The change is in the explosion of the very, very low-income section, trapped in government dependence, and the very high range, the so-called one percenters. So besides the historical and economic aspect of giving rise to a middle class, what else is so special about American citizenship? So in America, we have a naturalization process, and it's a really fascinating thing to watch. Anyone who officially takes the citizenship test and professes loyalty to the United States becomes a citizen. And I know it's a little more complicated than that. You have to have a job, you have to live here for 5 years. But essentially, that's the process. So the point is this, that's not so in other countries. I can't go to China and become a citizen. Not that I want to, right? But even still, what if I cooked exquisite French cuisine, I was fluent in French, and I lived in France for 20 years? I still would never be French. And that's, a Frenchman can come here, take the citizenship test, profess his loyalty, and he becomes American. And that's because America is still an idea. It is not an ethnicity. We are still a melting pot, constructed based on ideas. And these ideas are grounded in the 4 pillars. So what else is so special? Well, the Declaration of Independence states emphatically that the truths of our inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are self-evident. So that's a reference to biblical truths and natural law, meaning nobody has to explain it to you, right? By the fact that you're a mere human being, you understand that, and we already know these fundamental truths. So remember the child story by Hans Christian Andersen, The Emperor Has No Clothes? That's a perfect example of natural law. Even a child can understand these basic fundamental ideas. The Declaration of Independence further states that government does not give these rights, but government exists to secure and protect these rights. And so our government created a constitution to include citizenship as a mechanism to further safeguard these rights. However, in his essay, The Meaning of Citizenship, Carson Holloway makes a distinction between natural rights and political rights. Natural rights are ascribed to all human beings. So the Constitution protects citizens and non-citizens who visit or reside here, whereas political rights belong solely to citizens. What does that mean? Well, Holloway points out that in the Federalist Papers, number 84, Alexander Hamilton doesn't often refer to the rights about citizens, but about the political privileges of the citizens in the structure and the administration of the government. In other words, the Constitution describes citizens as those unique people who have the proper authority, which they can vote, they can hold elected office, they can sit on a jury and decide another citizen's or non-citizen's fate. A citizen, and only a citizen, can exercise this authority and power over others and even the whole community. We as citizens have power, but it's derived from our constitutional authority, not power based on willfulness or physical might. So that's another linguistic distinction, authority and power. It comes from the Greek indicating one's own self, independent, not made. For example, parents have authority over their children based on themselves, independent of any organization or government. Power, on the other hand, is something granted or seized, sometimes legally, sometimes not. So it's imperative that this power that comes from proper authority be exercised virtuously. And that's why founding fathers as different as Jefferson and Hamilton insisted that America should bestow citizenship very carefully. And so America did. The Constitution details very clearly that only citizens can hold public office and spells out the criteria thereof. Accordingly, Holloway continues, the Founding Fathers identified 3 marks of a good citizen: voting, virtue, and vigilance. The first quality of a good citizen is that he or she votes. And that's one reason why we fought a revolution, right? For the right to representation, to restore our God-given rights, not to be given them. One person, one vote is still sacred to our governments. And that's why election integrity is so critical to exercising our citizenship. It's supposed to be the premier example of unity in our diverse country, a unity that's emphasized in our very name, the United States of America, and in our motto, E pluribus unum. The second mark of a good citizen is virtue. If a vast majority of citizens exercise their power with virtue, the system works. But the Founding Fathers understood, while having the potential for great good, people also have the potential for great evil. So liberty depends on citizens with reason and virtue, pillars 1 and 2. So in other words, self-government is for those who can self-govern. James Madison emphasized that our Constitution requires sufficient virtue for self-government. The third mark of a good citizen, according to Holloway, is vigilance. Vigilance is to be watchful, attentive, and engaged. The Founding Fathers believed that citizens themselves are responsible for safeguarding our liberties. They knew government was downstream from culture and warned us to be vigilant of those who would trade our liberty for protection, for personal security, and comfort. A couple of months ago, the Quinnipiac poll asked Americans, if we were in the same position as the Ukrainians now, would they stay and fight or would they flee the country? 68% of one political party said they'd stay and fight. 40% of another political party said they'd leave. I won't tell you which one. So to repeat, citizenship is a mechanism by which we are virtuous and vigilant stewards of our liberty. It's not limited to just pleading our rights, but it's tasked with safeguarding them. But many Americans have unwittingly abdicated the practice of good citizenship. What does this look like? Well, let's start with the 4 pillars. There are many who no longer believe in biblical truths. Well, that's true for you, not for me. But I can guarantee you, for somebody who doesn't believe in objective biblical truth, if I stole their wallet right now, they'd say, give it back, it's mine. And they know that it's wrong. There are those who are functionally illiterate or refuse to engage in discourse and resort to name-calling and canceling their opponents because they believe more in the collective than the individual. Education has become a focus, this vague focus on values, not virtue, on knowing things, not knowledge of truth, or restricted to how to make a living, but not how to live. And many in our ruling class have rules for thee, not for me. Law enforcement is no longer based on a committed crime in search of evidence, but looking for evidence in search of a crime. Rule of law is twisted and manipulated and selectively applied based on one's ideology. In fact, it was leading Victor Davis Hanson a few months ago to say we no longer have a rule of law. The self-evident rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness no longer seem to be self-evident. It's morphed into a plethora of ambiguous rights that include the right to not be offended, and no longer an innate right to life or liberty or the pursuit of happiness to keep my business open. Both Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson agreed that all tyranny needs to get a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent. And then there's voting. The patriots who shed their blood for no taxation without representation would be horrified in a typical spring election, one coming up soon, Barely 20% of registered voters bother to vote. And all the issues that affect us right here in our own neighborhood, property taxes, zoning laws, education, building codes, local ordinances, pornography in our kids' libraries at school, multiple offenders given low or no bail, that's all local elections. We really want 20% of the people to make those decisions for us? Yet our local elections are being determined by that 20%. The Founding Fathers warned of this and how important it is to vote, be virtuous, and be vigilant. It all works together. And I need not detail how virtues are lacking. We read about it in our daily news feed every day. George Washington said there can be no public happiness without private morality. And I would propose to you that courage really is the virtue we need right now. When former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo spoke at the Steamboat Institute in Colorado, it was about 3 summers ago, it was during COVID, so we're watching all this on TV. He said the most serious external threat to America is China, but the most serious internal threat to America is education. Without voting and virtue, being vigilant in safeguarding our liberties is nearly impossible. But vigilance takes on a different aspect depending on the individual. For each of us, it'll be different. Maybe it's running for office. Maybe it's being appointed to a board, or generously donating to an organization who has your values. Maybe it's writing a letter to the editor or social media. But do not self-censor. We have a voice. Use that voice. Now, why else is citizenship in jeopardy? Well, there are about 3. Well, there are a lot more than 3, but Victor Davis Hanson talks about 3. Bureaucrats, who has the right to vote, and the move toward globalization. Bureaucrats, the unelected and powerful bureaucrats making policy decisions without citizen input, circumventing the 3 branches of government. This arm of the government threatens the unique role of citizenship. 2, who has the right to vote? Well, voting has always been a hallmark and a right, a privilege of citizens, but even that is being challenged. Not only because citizens themselves have failed to vote, but the voting process continues to be corrupted. Voting by mail with no ID would jeopardize the right and duty to vote afforded to citizens only. And there'd be no way to track who is voting, much less if the person is a citizen, right? There was a recent proposal in New York State to allow non-citizens to vote. Thankfully, last summer, it was struck down by their Supreme Court. Now, it's important to remember, this is not a diss on non-citizens. Remember, the U.S. Constitution protects non-citizens and citizens, but it's a citizen's unique responsibility to protect the Constitution, and that safeguards everybody's liberty. And then there's the Electoral College. That too is being challenged, which would completely nullify our votes here in Wisconsin, and America would no longer be a representative republic. The Electoral College is for each state to have a certain number of electoral votes according to its population. If we eliminated the Electoral College and had only the popular vote, there'd be no need for presidents to campaign in Wisconsin or Iowa. They would campaign in the most populated states: Texas, Florida, New York, California. That's not democracy, that's mob rule. And by the way, we are not a pure democracy. America is a constitutional representative republic. We have democratic elements to elect our representatives. We have state elections that are majorities. We have primaries where we use majorities. We have local referenda where we have majorities. But we are not a pure democracy. We're a constitutional representative republic. And then the third, globalization is destroying the very essence of citizenship, and citizenship is losing its meaning. Being a world citizen offers no rights and privileges, only being responsible and the expectation of following the rules. As one author put it, I am a citizen of a country, not a member of a world collective. So theoretically, the privilege of a citizen is living in a nation that is accountable to its citizens. And we have to actively safeguard that. Globalists are not accountable to their world citizens, And there's no mechanism that exists for that accountability. In a global society, how do you seek justice? Where do you go? Moreover, global governance is the opposite of the principle of subsidiarity. And Matt will get into this later, but basically the principle of subsidiarity is a nice balance to the threat of tyranny that the Founding Fathers talked about. What it means is a community of a higher order cannot interfere with the community and the internal life of the lower order. The principle of subsidiarity complements the limited government ideas from the Founding Fathers. But there's a history to this globalist movement. To put this in context, I'm just going to cite two documents. They're old. The French Revolution, Universal Rights of Man in 1789, is a document not based on any religious doctrine or any authority except nature. Emerging from the Enlightenment period, the French social contract claimed the origin of man's rights are from the state, not God, and that man is the source of the law, not God. So it completely rejects Pillar 1, biblical truths. Specifically, Article 6 states, and I quote, "The law is the expression of the general will of the people." Well, we know how that turned out. 40,000 people were sent to the guillotine by the will of the people.
Hey, Diane, can you repeat that document, please?
The Universal Rights of Man, 1789, the French Social Contract, Article 6. Now, another example of the assault on citizenship is the post-World War II document, the UN Declaration on Human Rights, from 1945. And I'll read this section through and comment. This is the preamble. Whereas human beings, it doesn't say citizens, it doesn't say men and women, shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief. It doesn't say what to believe in or who. And freedom from fear and want as the highest aspiration of the common people. Why common people and not all people? Human rights should be protected by the rule of law. But it doesn't say which human rights, and there's been a huge proliferation of human rights growing. In fact, Mike Pompeo looked into that in the Trump administration because there were so many made-up human rights. And what is meant by the common people? Is it the common people or the elite? And then in that same document in Article 21, Section 3, the will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government. But how can the will of the people be the authority of government in a globalist world? With this UN declaration, we really drifted away from natural law into designing our own conscience. It's a kind of self-deification. These new artificial rights are being created all the time that directly contradict the divine law and the natural law, and then obviously then our own natural rights. In his book, Things Worth Dying For, Charles Chaput writes, "This globalist dreaming asks us to see ourselves almost solely in economic terms. It reduces us to stateless, homeless consumers, not citizens. We have to be fully engaged as citizens of a community, not a faceless member of a collective. And current events trend toward globalist citizens, workers unable to be free." So in sharp contrast to other historical revolutions and this move toward global governance, the American Revolution was a synthesis of all four pillars. Our founding fathers relied on God and entrusted America to his providence. The American Declaration of Independence states our highest aspirations are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not freedom from fear and want. We are human beings with a mind and a soul, not just a body and appetites and desires. And our constitutional basis of authority is God and natural law, that both farmers and framers, plowmen and professors understood at that time. The divine law is the ultimate source of all laws. And when our laws become untethered from the divine or natural law, that leads to laws, unjust laws, arbitrarily passed by the whim of people in power. Martin Luther King said, "An unjust law is no law at all." But he was quoting from Augustine of Hippo from the 4th century. Our Constitution is intended to protect everyone's natural rights and to protect our American sovereignty that should never be subordinate to global interests. So there you have it, American citizenship. It is the exercise of our rights, but as well as our unique responsibilities to safeguard them through continuous civic engagement, which is voting, virtue, and vigilance, because we are citizens, not subjects. And that's thank you for coming. We can take a really short break if you want, or should we just keep going?
Let's keep going.
Yep, keep going. Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, we're going to keep going.
Our next speaker is Pastor Matthew Trella. He has been here before. He was here 2 years ago, and he gave his talk to those running for WISRED, for the candidates. And it was so amazing. Oh, Matt, get me a book. Please.
I forgot your book. I forgot my prop. Dad, there you go.
So Pastor Matt, which is what I call him, is the pastor of Mercy Seat Christian Church. Matt, is it located in Brookfield? Yeah. He is the graduate of the Valley Forge Christian College. His wife Clara is right back there. They had, are you ready for this? You thought Diane had a lot of kids. They had 11. So between Diane and Pastor Matt, we could have an island. How many grandchildren?
29.
What? Okay, 29 grandchildren. Yeah, it's an island. Okay, so he has written this book. I would highly suggest you get this. We have them out in the lobby. They're also here. I just want to read you this one paragraph because it brings me to tears on the back of his book. This book places in your hands a hopeful blueprint for freedom. Appealing to history and the Word of God, Pastor Matthew Trella answers these questions and shows Americans can successfully resist the federal government's attempts to trample our Constitution, assault our liberty, and impugn the law of God. People, I introduce Pastor Matt.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Okay, cool. I'm going to put this up here because we're going to show a video early on. And don't worry, it's only 3 minutes long. Okay, so let me find it here first off. Well, I don't know why that came up, but anyway. The world we live in, right? So, I just wanted to say something before I begin. I'm honored to be speaking here, and it's a great blessing to be with all of you. And my topic is why counties are important and how do they preserve freedom. And I've told people for years, like the last 13 or so years, quit focusing on the federal elections and the presidential election, focus on state, county, and local elections. Nobody would listen until about 3 years ago when first the pre-pandemic came up and then the steal of the election came up, and suddenly people were flooding into county and local government to make a stand for freedom because they realized not only was the federal government at war with them, but their state officials loved to play the tyrant too. And there were plenty of tyrants at the local level also, right? We all learned that. We learned that power really does go to men's heads. But people flooded into these governments and began to unseat them. So this video I have here, A year ago at this time, last February, I speak all over the place, and I was in Michigan for a week. I spoke to 5 different counties. In 5 different counties, some places had multiple meetings, and the people got on fire about the doctrine of the lesser magistrate, and lo and behold, they ran for office, and they completely flipped 3 of the 5 counties, completely took them over. And so this little 3-minute video is about one of those counties. This is Lapeer County in Michigan, and you're going to see 4 men who ran for office and won, and hopefully it just puts a fire in your heart and encourages you to see stuff like this. Here we go.
After COVID and with our state being shut down, seeing most of our elected officials basically doing the opposite of what we were wanting them to do. They told me and everybody else that we're not going to do anything to protect you from vaccine mandates, mask mandates, or from being fired from your job for not taking a vaccine. And at that point, I was like, this is like the last straw for me. And after realizing that our state government wasn't going to do anything, we started getting involved in county government.
This is where everything starts. It starts at the grassroots. You've got to get involved at the grassroots, and I think this is where I could have made a difference. And what was happening in my business, my employees, and my family. You know, my freedom and liberty doesn't end where somebody else's fear begins. You know, this is a constitutional right. There was no science behind the mask mandate. There was no science really at all behind what they call the vaccine. And I told the commission in the presence of the health director that was there that if they did this again to us, that I would not comply, and that you would have to come and arrest me.
That was basically dictatorship is what our governor did. It affected my family. My mother is in a nursing home. We had Christmas with my mother on cell phones through a window, locked down like it's a prison. It's wrong. And the utter disrespect shown to the people. I mean, you're a public official, you're supposed to be working for the people, and they weren't working for the people, they were working for their own self-interest.
They don't care what people want. Over 100 people at this meeting, and the officials just don't care. They just don't care. We have to stop blaming each other. We have to start getting up and doing something, even if it's something we've never done before, ever. Christian people that call themselves Christians, read history, read the Bible. In the Bible, you'll see God's people over and over and over and over standing up. Some of them being at the highest level of civil authority. If Christian principles are not being upheld and promoted, then evil will be. So if things are going in the wrong direction, the worst thing you can do is see something need to be done and don't do something. We want to speak, we want to talk, but we don't put any actions to our words. I think the time has come where that's not going to work anymore. Somebody has to stand up and stand in the gap. I have 5 little children. I don't want my children to pay for the iniquities of their fathers.
So excellent. We just released that today. And so I hope that was a blessing to you. I'm looking for my other thing now. Okay, so I think I gotta put this little dopey down. Let's see. And then I go from the beginning. Keep your fingers crossed. So I'm gonna put this down here just so it's out of my way. Because I don't really need it up here. I can just flip the thing when I get to the thing. Oh, did I lose it? I guess I better watch how I step. So it's okay if you put up some of the lights. That'd be better for me because I can't read my notes. And that might be important. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this time that we have. We thank you for Diane's talk. And Lord, we thank you for everything that was said there. So important. Whirlwind view of citizenship in Western civilization. Bless her talk to the hearts of people. And Lord, help me to set forth this talk that you've given me on county government, and may it put a fire in people's hearts and a desire to serve you and to see evil checked. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So, counties here in Wisconsin, as in most states, derive their authority from state government. But that does not mean they are meant to be mere provinces of the state. They are not meant to be mere implementation centers of unjust or immoral or unconstitutional law, policy, or court opinion by either federal government or state government. Counties possess autonomy. They are a lawful body in their own right, and they were done so by design of our founders because they serve an incredibly important position. Understand, our founders gave us, they pillared in this nation, a true federalism. In a true federalism, all four of the great governments matter. Family government, church government, civil government, all meant to produce within the individual the fourth great government, self-government. All four of them matter. We now live in a statist hell, so now everybody looks only and always to state government or civil government in order to cure our ills, find direction for life. And in a true federalism, when it comes to civil government, you have multiple levels of government and multiple branches at each level. And the reason our founders wanted it that way was because of the nature of man. He's wicked and in need of a savior. They held to a Christian view of the nature of man. They didn't want power to reside in one man like a monarch. They were throwing off the king, nor did they intend for power to reside in a small group of men like an oligarchy, which SCOTUS has become. They wanted there to be multiple levels, multiple branches and offices at all levels, so that if any one branch or office began to play the tyrant, another branch or office or offices would check the ones playing the tyrant. That's what they expected. The duty of the lesser authorities in the face of unjust, immoral, unconstitutional law, policy, or court opinion is interposition. They are to interpose and defy the superior tyrant authority in order to rein in their lawlessness. Why is interposition of the lesser magistrate so important? Because the superior tyrant authority always counts on the blithe compliance of the lesser authorities in order to get their evil down in the fabric of society. And when they lose that blithe compliance, that's when the tyrant superior authority knows he's got a problem, trouble. Now, sometimes the county magistrates need to be smart in how they interpose. And I wanted to share with you this one story from Little Newton County, which is in southwest Missouri. Remember when Biden first took office? Remember that? He was talking about how he was going to infringe on our Second Amendment rights. He was going to use executive order and other policy changes in order to accomplish that and push Congress to do it. To us also, legislatively, Little Newton County got their board together and they actually passed an ordinance in defiance of Biden's tyranny, in defiance of federal lawlessness. And their little ordinance declares three things. Number one, any law or policy which infringes upon the Second Amendment rights of their citizens is null, void, and of no authority in Newton County. And the second part of their ordinance declares that if any county official aids and abets any federal or state agents infringing upon the Second Amendment rights of their citizens, they shall be immediately removed from office. And the third part of their ordinance instructs their sheriff to arrest any federal or state agents who come into their county to infringe upon the Second Amendment rights of their citizens. And of course, so, nobody would have known what Little Newton County did, right? Nobody. But the media couldn't handle it. And they just had to attack them and vilify them and marginalize them. And so it became a national news story, and now there's dozens of counties across America that have that same ordinance as Newton County. But I asked them when we went down to interview, because we went down to interview, made a little video. If you go to our Defy Tyrants channel at YouTube or Rumble, Defy Tyrants, you can see the interview there. But while we were off the air, I asked them, I said, so what did you use for authority in order to make this ordinance? And they said, well, part of the authority delegated to us is that we are responsible for the safety of the citizens of Newton County. And so we all know that armed citizenry is much safer than an unarmed citizenry. And so it was under that that delegated authority that we possess, that we made this ordinance regarding the Second Amendment. Sometimes we need to be smart about how we interpose. Secondly, sometimes open defiance by counties is needed. The story I love to tell, and there were literally over 500 acts of interposition that we documented during the pre-pandemic. Almost all were done by county or local officials, by county boards, sheriffs, mayors, city councils, interposing against their state authorities, interposing even against the federal government itself. So this one county is little Madison County, which sits on the Mississippi River directly across from St. Louis. They're in Illinois. And in May of 2020, Governor Pritzker came up with his latest decree. Remember, they were having them like every 72 hours at that time. And he decided that his latest little decree was going to be that no businessman could open their business anywhere in the state of Illinois until I say you can open your business. And now if any businessman opens their business before I say you can, now you're going to be arrested and charged with a crime. Well, the very next day, in a state of 102 counties, only one county gathered their men together, their county board, and they made their own decree. And their decree stated that our businessmen are free to reopen now, and that we will use all our power and all our authority to protect our businessmen. And then they cautioned the governor and the state not to interfere with their businessmen. Well, Governor Pritzker responded in good tyrant fashion, and the next day, in fact, for the next 3 days, he held press conferences damning Madison County, how he was going to remove their federal money, their state money, and a whole list of bad things that were going to happen to them if they didn't get with the program. But the county men did not flinch. They stood resolute. And then 7 days from the time Governor Pritzker made that decree, the Illinois State Police put out their own declaration via a press release, and they declared that they would not arrest any businessman anywhere in the state of Illinois that opened their business before Governor Pritzker said they could open their business. They had decided to stand with the men at Madison County. Sometimes open defiance by a county is needed. Understand, if it had not been for the interposition of that one county, the entire state would have remained under the draconian decree of Governor Pritzker. And understand also this, the man who heads up that county board is a Christian brother who had read my book 2 years earlier, had instructed the magistrates there of their duty. And so they did what they did and interposed, and it benefited the whole state. And look where Illinois is at now, right? They passed an assault weapons ban. And now we have 90 sheriffs in 90 counties of Illinois saying it's unconstitutional and we will not uphold this law. It is the revolt of the sheriffs. 90 of the 102 counties are defying the unconstitutional actions of the state. The defiance of the sheriffs is an act of interposition and a demonstration of the lesser magistrate doctrine. So, this gives you a little map, and it's even more green now. This was only when there was 80 of them. Now there's 90 of them. And this is their letter. Many of them use the exact same letter and just put it on their letterhead declaring this is an unconstitutional law and they will not uphold it in their county. Encouraging, right? So, Governor Pritzker responded to the declarations of the sheriffs in predictable tyrant fashion. Pritzker stated they took an oath of office to uphold the law. As law enforcement, that's their job, and I expect them to do that job. You can have all the resolutions and declarations that you want, but the reality is that the laws that are on the books, you don't get to choose which ones people are going to follow, unquote. Well, the truth of the matter is sometimes laws are made that need to be opposed. Diane was talking about Western civilization. It's the whole history of Western civilization. That when unjust or immoral laws are made, blithe compliance isn't in order, rather resistance and opposition is in order. And so the sheriffs took an oath to uphold the Constitution. They didn't take an oath of blithe compliance to Governor Pritzker or to the federal government or the state authorities. No, they took an oath to uphold the Constitution and their state constitution. Here's what Pritzker also said. He said, the fact is that, yes, there are, of course, people who are trying to politically grandstand, who want to make a name for themselves by claiming that they will not comply. But the reality is that the state police is responsible for enforcement, as are all law enforcement all across our state, and they will in fact do their job or they won't be in their job, unquote. So here's Governor Pritzker. We have a battle of jurisdictions. Isn't this awesome? Long overdue. Way overdue. Need to see much more of this. So he's threatening their jobs, but the truth is, what is Pritzker going to do? And what is he going to do to 90 of them? Sheriffs and county board officials are elected. And it appears Pritzker understands his options are limited. The media like to broadcast his bluster against the sheriffs everywhere, which I just read to you, but they failed to quote what his statement further said, which was this: it's our state police and law enforcement across the state that will in fact enforce the law, and these outlier sheriffs will comply, or frankly, they will have to answer to the voters. Yes, to the voters, not him. Last night, a county board member from the state of Illinois, see if I can find it here, texted me this. He said, it's interesting that the state to your south is very fertile ground for lesser magistrates standing up and speaking out. What more can we do? We're outnumbered in the General Assembly. Your book and concept has ripened and has come of age quickly in Illinois. It makes sense that the lesser magistrate concept is more recognized and appreciated in states with tyranny. Conservative states are not there yet, but of course they will be depending on the issue. So we have this little campaign that we're doing where we're sending the book to all 90 sheriffs. Several of them already had it, but we're going to send them another one anyway. And so we want them all to know, those who interposed, that they did right. We want them to know, like Diane talked about, the 4 cities. We want them to be able to see that they did right biblically, morally, that they did right historically, that they did right legally. And their interposition is needed. Amen? So, first, sometimes when you're in county government, you have to be smart in your interposition. Second, sometimes when you're in county government, you need open defiance. And third, you may have to do things in the future you're not authorized to do. The country is breaking apart. Counties are becoming important in the process. Counties may secede from one state and join an adjoining state as things break apart. Several adjoining counties may end up leaving a state and forming their own state. Remember, this happened during the Civil War. Counties, as things break apart and lawlessness continues to grow in this nation, counties may have to take on responsibilities they normally wouldn't do. Think of that. Now, I wanted to give you some practice here. See where I'm at. And I want to start with some preliminaries regarding county government. The first regarding the preliminaries is this: you need to begin to attend county meetings and become familiar with county government where you reside. Now, let me tell you, there's probably nothing more awful than a county government meeting. It can be, and one of the reasons a lot of people don't want to run for county government is because how awful it is. I don't want to deal with potholes and all that kind of thing. But understand, this is a hugely important piece to what our founders pillared, county government, in order to interpose and stop evil. You are a watchman when you're on a county board, to stop the evil, to not let it get down in the fabric of society. So all that nonsense you got to endure and do a good job and all that other stuff, yeah, understand you'll be there in the hour you're needed to take a stand. So before you run, if you're thinking of running, first off, attend county meetings, become familiar with county government where you reside, and establish relationship with your county supervisor and board. There's a million things I could say about that, but I'm limited on time. Learn what authority your county possesses. This is massively important. And this is found at the county building itself usually, and within the state constitution and statutes, section 59. Section 59 of the Wisconsin statutes. And understand that all of it is under the law of God. So you have to look into what authority they possess, what authority you would possess if you were on a county board. The next thing I want to talk about when it comes to practice is the Wisconsin County Association. The Wisconsin County Association is not a government entity. They are an NGO of sorts, and they are leftist. And the role they play, that the WCA plays in a large part, is to hold the hands of the county officials, most of whom don't know what they're doing and are looking for guidance, and help them into their totalitarian agenda. That's what they're looking for. That's what they do. The Wisconsin County Association. So you have to be cognizant of that fact. One county supervisor who was elected for the first time wrote a little summary of his meeting there. I believe it was in September. And he talked about how they push green energy. Get rid of the fossil fuels. We want to get everybody into green energy. Well, Clark County, just this last week, put out a resolution of defiance against the state of Wisconsin regarding their green energy policies. And the men on that board, some of whom were just elected last year and were recently put into office, the guy who heads it up has read my book on the doctrine of lesser magistrated, taught it to all the other county officials, and now here they've stood in a position. They have stopped the big corporations from coming in and doing what they're doing, because now you got a battle of jurisdiction between the county and the state. And they're taking a stand, and hopefully other counties will join them in their declarations and their resolutions and the stand that they're making. So understand, what they've done right now has literally stopped multi-million-dollar corporations from accomplishing what they wanted to do in Clark County. That's no small matter. This gentleman, who was the county supervisor writing this summary, talked about how WCA pushes the whole green energy deal, and then he said this also. He said, on Tuesday, the first session I attended was public health. Lessons learned and looking forward. It was nothing more than a rehash of being aligned with the failed CDC guidelines and being more prepared to be in lockstep with their assertions of protocol to follow, quarantine, masking, vaccination, etc. Not one original thought on alternate modalities or methods of prevention was presented. Disgusting but predictable, unquote. Yeah, do you see why it's important for you to be on the county board? Because most of them, it's just something they want to do, build their own careers or whatever, and they're just yes men, they just rubber stamp everything. The reason a lot of people got involved in county government is because they saw their county board members love to play the tyrants, and so they unseated them. Very difficult to take over a board in Wisconsin, though, because of the number of supervisors you have on the board here. Do you know most states only have 5 county commissioners for each county? That's the vast majority are that way. We're a rarity. We have 24, 27, and on down the line. He said this, he went on, I find it most disturbing that our leadership in the WCA would endorse and promote anything that would be in conflict, degrade, or dismantle any of our inalienable rights, which many of our fellow citizens, past and present, have served, fought, bled, and died for. These are the kind of men we need on county board. These people are just about their own self-aggrandizement, these children who want to act like they're something. It's time for the adults to come into the room. And it's time for us to get engaged. When it comes to public input, you need to investigate how your county does public input. Most of them have 3 minutes, that's all you get to say, but you can talk on anything. Take advantage of it. Educate your county officials. We have people across this country who do this every month, faithfully. Go in, or almost every month, go in and educate their magistrates regarding their role, function, and duties and limits. This brings us to another important role in county government, matters. You don't have to attend the meetings. You don't have to run. You can investigate, okay? You can investigate. That fits into a lot of people. Regarding corruption, again, investigate. You need the investigative people to identify the lawlessness and then tackle it, and if need be, take it to state court, issue a resolution, or make an ordinance. When you run for county government, get on important committees. The important ones are executive, finance, human resources, health, and human services. Now let me say something about money, because we all know how big money is, right? That's one of the most awful things when I first got involved going to Madison years ago. I thought it was all about honesty, righteousness, equity, justice. And I've learned it really has to do with this thing called money, number one. And secondly, oh yeah, that would be money too. And thirdly, yeah, money. And it's easy to come to the place where you don't really view it as the state house, but more like the whorehouse, because everyone's bought off by the money. The reputation we have, the ministers that I go there with to talk to the magistrates, our reputation behind our backs is those are honest men who can't be bought. That's bad to them. You understand that? It's bad. Money is big. You must resist the money. When the pandemic took place, Washington County, where I'm from, was the first county to actually stand in defiance of Evers. 6 weeks after it all began, we put out our first resolution saying the county will not follow this nonsense. They had me come in and teach the doctrine of lesser magistrate. 3 years earlier, the sheriff was there, county board officials, West Bend councilmen, because that's their seat, and also some state representatives, and then they invited the people in. So they knew their duty, and they did it. And they issued 2 more resolutions too. One reaffirming their oath, and then another one kicking our state Republican officials in the rear end and the legislators to do something. And just like, remove the powers that you should never gave to these health Nazis to begin with. How about that for a reason, right? So even though the county I live in issued these resolutions, they still kept taking the money. So I ended up in a little tussle with some of the county supervisors over there. I said, you shouldn't take the money. And I said, all the money is used to legitimize this fiction in the minds of men. And their response was, well, if we don't take the money, somebody else will. Yeah, they built the whole pretendemic on 2 mountains. A mountain of lies, number 1, and a mountain of money, number 2. And all these government officials at every level were like Thorin at the mountain of Erebor, just glazed over. It's a reference to the Lord of the Rings. Just glazed over with the money. It was terrible. They want the money and it traps them. Remember, with the shekels come the shackles. People often ask me, who made that? Who said that? With the shekels come the shackles. And I always say, probably some guy who learned the hard way. Read the fine print. You are giving up your lawful autonomy when you take the money. For example, the masks at schools being imposed on the kids was because the school boards took the money, and that was part of the deal. And we would go to the county meetings or the school board meetings. None of them had read the fine print. They just wanted the money, and they were giving up their lawful authority to get money. You don't do that. And this is going to be the hardest thing to get counties to realize. Conservative counties taking the money must stop. Here is the commitment you must make. And again, the investigate people read the fine print. You don't have to read the fine print. Your investigating people do. They have time to do it. They're retired, they're at home, they look it up, they tell you what it says.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Does that mean that in Washington County, they took the money, and the kids had to wear the masks?
Yeah, well, I don't know about the school board there, because I didn't look into that. And so the county didn't have authority over the school, over the kids in the school. That would be the school boards themselves. Yep. The commitment must simply be this regarding the money. And listen to me now. You must refuse all money that is used to conduct immoral or unjust policies, and refuse all money that impugns the constitutions, whether state or national. You must say no to all unconstitutional spending, mandates, and acts by the state or federal governments. You talk revolutionary, not taking the money. Those guys told me, we gotta take it. We don't take the money, somebody else will. I said, let them take it. We should be a city set on a hill. An example of other counties to rally to. Say we can't be bought. Freedom means too much to us. Men fought, bled, and died for the freedoms we possess. We will not blithely give them away for some money. Amen? When it comes to referendums, they're not legally binding, but you can do them to educate. I'm talking about county referendums, but you can use them to educate and to make stands. If you get on the board, bring the community and board together. Educate and lead. It's a whole nother sermon. People were involved massively when the health Nazis had their fangs out. Remember that? You go into meetings, I was like, pinch me, there's this many people at a public hearing? I mean, hundreds at some of them I went to. Now many have become uninvolved because the fangs have gone back in. But understand the tyrants haven't gone home. They are still busy building the infrastructure to the next round of tyranny. Even John Hopkins and Bill Gates and the other group, the usual crew, just put out their latest thing, which was similar to Event 201. Remember that, which was done in October of 2019 and then sprung on us in March of 2020? Yeah, well, their latest one is called Catastrophic Contagion. And it's set in 2025. And this thing they're looking at there is millions of children dying. And of course, statists love to use the children as an excuse for everybody to give up their freedom and liberty. They haven't gone home. They're still busy building their tyranny through government structures and technology. The counties are going to matter. They're going to matter to stop the evil. So yeah, deal with the potholes. Good people who love Christ and love freedom, they need to be in positions to stop the evil. 4 resolutions that are very important if you want to get to know your county officials and where they stand. One is a Second Amendment resolution or ordinance like Newton County did. A second is a constitutional county, which hundreds of counties have adopted now across the country. Any person or government body does anything that impugns the Constitution, it's null, void, and no authority in that county. Another one being done is medical freedom resolutions, that there will be no mask mandates, that there will be no shot mandates, that there will be no vaccine passports, whether by government or business within the county. And the fourth is the sanctuary county for the preborn. Once you bring one of those, you know everything you need to know about who's sitting on the board. The last 3 things I want to talk about here real quickly is, number 1, library boards often come under county government. I have not investigated how it all works here in Wisconsin, but I'm pretty sure some library boards are elected and others are appointed. It's important to understand when it comes to county government, one size does not fit all, as the WCA is trying to make it be. in order to usher in more of the totalitarian state we all live under already. So look to see things particular to your county. And the third thing is this: run for county government. Remember the video? Yeah, they had had enough. They knew they could not sit by any longer, and they ran. County and local governments matter. Just read the history of man and the governments of men. Time and time again, we've seen small localities take on empires and win. In my book, I have an example of that when it comes to the Magdeburg Confession. So let me end with saying this. In closing, understand the American Revolution began in the counties. It did. Just read the history surrounding the Stamp Act. Tons of acts of interposition. The rebellion against tyranny started in the counties. When evil is done by a superior authority, whether it be unjust, immoral, unconstitutional, or all three, the duty of less authorities is interposition. The statists are using counties to get their evil down in the fabric of society. DAs being one example. The statists want people dependent on government. Look at all the health and family programs county government oversees. A proper county government would look rather to church and business to address the problem. Proper county government would understand its limits and not cross over those limits and invade family, church, and self-governments, stand in opposition to edicts from the state that want them to be a totalitarian hell. A proper county government and government officials understand that their duty is to serve the people, not lord their authority in totalitarian fashion over them, as many saw when the health mandates came out. Many saw that power does go to men's heads. So counties can stop the evil, but it's bigger than that. You must not only stop the evil, you must build, you must deconstruct the statist hell that counties have been made into and reconstruct them to what they were intended to be. We need a new caliber of men, Christian men, men who are fighters, who fear God, not men, men who are willing to challenge those who arrogantly impugn the law of God and who trample the constitutions. Men with a faith firm in Christ which transcends the trivial temptations of earthly power or wealth or being liked. Are you one of those men? I pray you are. Thank you so much for your time. God bless you.
Thank you, Matt. I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight. It's a cold January night, and I see a lot of new faces, and it's great. Please consider joining RPWC so we can continue to put on sessions like this. So the purpose of tonight's introductory talks were to provide a background for everybody. So February 16th, Paul Farrow, the county executive, and Paul Decker, the president of the county board, will be here to talk about how the county government functions in Wisconsin. It's different from other counties, and it's all based on population. So if you read the Blue Book, that nerdy Wisconsin Blue Book, it explains all of that. So come with your questions. Now that you have a basis of county government, or county over country, come with questions. They are anxious to hear your questions, and they want to teach. They were very excited to be asked to come. They're going to explain the organization of the county, all the different departments, and the functions of each, which boards are appointed, what boards are elected, things like that. Okay, so Kathy has a question.
I have one question before you guys leave. Can someone, any of you share tonight, what was your greatest takeaway?
What was your greatest takeaway tonight? We'd like some feedback too. I mean, was this helpful?
What did you learn
What did you
tonight?
learn?
That
Don't be shy.
Basically, what it is the power. In fact, I can't remember who made a quote. The one guy was on TV, some other guy, he was mad at the 20 people that stood up to the rest of the government and everything. He said, well, that's not right for a minority to do that. But yes, that is. Somebody once said, there's a silent minority
Right.
that can stop bigger things.
Yeah,
So
right.
basically, when you start at the bottom and start with that solution. And also, one other thing, we talk about, the government is talking about money. This other professor I told you about before, he also wrote a book, Submission. And that's how we send money to Washington. They send it back. We have to follow Boland's rules. That's our own money. Any rules and regulations that we have to follow using our own money. It's like the mafia.
Is there anybody else? Thank you, Lou. Yeah.
Get involved and be
Yeah. Yeah, and getting involved will be different for different people, right? Whatever your gifts are. If you're an avid reader and you want to try to get on the library board in your local town, do it. Find out how that works. So we hope to provide all of this information over the next few months. We'll skip March, and then in April, we're hoping to have information about school boards. How do school boards function? What's their relationship with the teachers union? What's the relationship with the DPI and with the Wisconsin Association of School Boards? That's a very multifaceted web of educational entities. So that's our hope. If you are not on our mailing list, please fill out the membership form and make sure that you get our emails, okay? Check your spam too and your junk mail. Our emails are landing in people's junk mail.
Google loves to put us in spam.
Yeah.
Diane, I noticed that this is being recorded.
Mhm.
Is this accessible? Because like I know I can't make the February meeting and I want to view.
We are recording it and we're hoping to put it out there at some point. We don't know if it'll be YouTube or Rumble or whatever. We'll figure that out and we'll let everybody know via email.
Get rid of each school.
All right. Everyone, thank you so much for coming.
Wait, one more.
Oh, sorry. Wait, I'm sorry. Is there somebody else? Oh, yes. Thank you. Yep. Do not be afraid. Absolutely.
Yes,
Thank
I'm going
you.
down.
All right, thank you.